Hello everyone. Welcome to the third episode of the Working Software series. In this episode we will talk about security and how to make database access layer secure. As I have already explained in episode 0 when this series started, I plan to show you code that simply works. The working software is a concept I admire, and I tend to produce software that can be demonstrated to work and work correctly. I'm not going to tell you too much theory, but yet there will be backing theory here. I will show you an ASP.NET Core sample application, very simple one, and I will try to add a couple of features to it which require security, and you will see how complicated it will become if I just followed what usually books and simple demos on the internet suggest to do to secure access to database. So, this is the demo application. It is already developed to some stage where I will run it and you will see it, where I can log in and I can, in theory, see the items assigned to a user, but in practice those items will not be there because I still didn't insert them in a database. That is where the rest of the demonstration, the development, will begin. So if I log in, I haven't implemented a password. I have cut many corners in this demo application because they are not relevant. I am just showing you the relevant elements. I have logged in. I can see the products which are still not there. In theory, I should be able to add them, but this feature is not implemented yet. So, and I can, of course, log out. There are two users in the database, me and my neighbor. We both should have our products. We both should be able to add our own products without seeing each other's products. That is the security part. This application must be secured so that everyone can only see own objects in the database and not anybody else's objects, and vice versa. Nobody else should see my objects which I have created when I logged in. So that is quite typical in any web application. And now I will show you the elements of this solution. It is ASP.NET Core application which is using the Entity Framework Core to access the database. So you see these migrations for the user and product objects which I have already modeled. User only has the username. I have skipped dealing with passwords. And product only has the name right now. When it comes to accessing database, there is this authentication context, DB context, which is authenticating a user, which is used to authenticate the user. Here is the DB set it returns, and it is used in the login page. Here is the login page, and this is the backing model. This is the Razor page. When I post the username, it will search for the user with that username and authenticate it. I'm using cookies authentication, the simplest of all methods. And when user is authenticated, I'm setting the claim with username. Later on, for example, in this index, not index, where is it? In the layout, where's my layout? When I need to know whether the user is authenticated, that claim will be available to me. I will see that the user is authenticated, and I will be able to read claims. For example, I'm reading the claim of type name and displaying it. So if you noticed that logout and username, this is how it is rendered. I'm telling you these things for just to be complete. These are very basic elements of any web application. You need to see them because that is where complications will appear later. This is the critical element where I am setting the claims to identify the user and make that user authenticated in my application. Later on, there are products pages. The index page is that empty table. There's a table, here's a table, which is supposed to display names of all products and to allow me to delete them or to show details. So the details page, display details, okay, I should show you the C# code. Display details for a product with a given ID. This is the database ID. How does the details page display the details? It does that by finding the product by its ID. I didn't show you the content context. This is the database context, which only exposes products as a DB set. So you can select them, you can find by ID, you can add, you can remove, you can do anything you want. So the problem with the product ID as a database identity is that this application is exposing ID to the internet. ID is literally a private attribute of your database. You simply don't tell it around. Somebody will store that ID somewhere, copy the link, do something. That ID is a system ID. If you redo your system, if you replace your database with a different database, with a file, whatever, ID, if you expose ID to the outside, even if you exported the database, moved it to a different server, imported it there, IDs might differ. ID is a private attribute of an object in your particular database. You should not simply give it out. But it is also related to security, because once you have given the inner ID, hackers will know to remember it, and they will use it against you. And you will see how. That was the content context which exposes DB set. Some people will object to exposing DB set. Some people prefer IEnumerable, not iQueryable, not DB set. I will put that discussion on the side. It is a different topic. Both sides are right in that dispute. My stance is that in small projects it is okay to expose iQueryable and even DB set. In larger projects that becomes a liability. It tends to complicate code. So we shall leave that aside for now. You have seen how details are loaded by finding by ID. I'll show you how you can delete the object again by ID. I will find it, and if it is non-null, since dbset returns null when even find returns null. But this time I have used first or default explicitly to find that object, and if it is non-null, I'm just removing it and saving changes. Index contains an input field to add new item, new product, and it posts back to its model. And that is a function which I didn't implement yet. And that is where development will start. The main problem, Zlatko, the main problem I see is that function doesn't stop users from touching products that belong to other users. Very good, Zlatko. However, the reason why I didn't continue developing this application is precisely in that last part. Belong to other users. This product model doesn't belong to anyone. So the request I'm facing is that products must belong to the logged in user. And that is, so I come to work, I open the ticket, and I start developing. You have seen the application in its current form. What do I do next? I get to the user and I say, okay, there must be a connection between the user and the product. However, there is a problem there. If you look at, there's one more thing I skipped. There is this database context I called entire context. It is used to define all entities, and I'm only using it to update the database and to generate scripts. When working with database, I'm actually using two separate and smaller contexts. You should not have the entire database described in one context and then create it with every request, because creation of large contexts is expensive. DB contexts are cheap when they only have a couple of tables and nothing more. If they have 100 or 1,000 tables, their creation will be very slow, and you will notice that. Your application will be slow. So you don't do that. Instead, you split access to database into small DB contexts, and then you have to make decisions. How do you split? Because if product needs the user, if this product needs this user, then they must be located in the same DB context, right? The answer I prefer is no. And the way I design DB contexts is by following domain-driven design, the principles of DDD, with bounded contexts. And bounded contexts and aggregates are the answer to designing focused and small DB contexts in your application. So I will have an authentication bounded context, and I will have the content bounded context. And each will deal with its own responsibilities. Authentication context will be used to authenticate the user, but once the user is authenticated, nobody else needs to see the user object. Why? Because user object will contain many things here, maybe password, maybe, I don't know, street address or things like that. Why would the product, which is located in a different part of the application, see the street address and telephone number of a user? There's no reason for that. That might be used in some advanced authentication schemes, but nothing more than that. Instead, the product should have a reference to a user to which that product belongs. And then we come to IDs again. ID of the user is the system ID. If I went to the product and said public and owner ID and made the navigation property, Entity Framework would happily construct a foreign key relationship between the product and the user and reference the user in every row in the database, in every product row. And that is precisely what I don't want. Because when I split my domain into multiple subdomains, then I don't want any references between them. There is one important principle in database programming which is not observed too much in out there, but I'm sticking firmly to that principle. I don't add foreign key relationships between database schemas. If you look at the context, I have created these extension methods that are actually building the model. User entity will be in the authentication database schema, and product entity will be in the content schema. I intentionally did that because I really feel that authentication is one problem domain and dealing with content is a different problem domain. So my application will definitely have two database schemas right when it starts. And I don't want the product table to have a foreign key to the user table. Why? Because in the future, I might pull out the authentication schema out of the database, put it somewhere else, use OAuth, use an external service. What if there won't be any authentication schema in my database anymore? If I had foreign key relationships, I won't be able to refactor the service which is dealing with authentication. And it's not only authentication, it is very specific. Think about more mundane schemas like invoicing. There are products and there are invoices for them. Those two things are separate and they would also go to a different schema. What if products had to scale out at their own pace? What if I had 1 million users, but 99.9% of everything is free and there is no invoicing for that? So invoicing application would sit idle while the products part of the application would burn the CPU. I would have to scale it out to multiple servers. I would pull the entire products service into a separately deployable service, deploy it separately, maybe redo the database layer entirely to improve its performance. I will do many things to make that work. On the other hand, the invoicing part will be a simple application which will remain the way it was done the first day. Again, if I had any foreign key relationships between these two, I wouldn't be able to pull out one service and split it from the other. And so, what is the answer to that? How do I do that then? Owner ID is not possible. What I normally do is to start by giving stable keys to objects, to strong objects, which need to be referenced in other schemas, in other parts of the application. So I would actually expose the key to the user. It will be a string because I want it to be general. I will never expose this ID because, again, if I exported and imported the authentication schema, IDs would change. This key, however, will remain forever. It should not be equal to username because people are allowed to change their username. And if now you need to think about uniqueness. If one user occupied username A and somebody else tried to register with name A, that attempt would fail. But now the first user changes username to B and the third user comes and tries to use A, that might be allowed. But if the key, which is stable and never changes, was set to be equal to username, then the first user, after changing username to B, would remain with key A, and the second user would try to reuse that, and since there would probably be a unique index here, that attempt would probably fail. So don't mix username and the key. One very simple way is to just get a GUID, and that will be enough. When a user registers, assign a GUID and stick with that GUID forever. And then on dependent side, you would not reference the ID, but you would say there is an owner somewhere else, in a different schema, in a different database, in a different system with a key. And in that way, you are making permanent connections between objects in different systems. By the way, For that reason, deleting a user in the authentication schema should never be allowed. Instead, you would probably add a Boolean flag which says whether this is active or not, this user. Or, even better, you would have a separate table associated with the users table, which adds artifacts about the user's lifetime. So when the user has registered, when the user has changed this attribute or that attribute, and ultimately so-called tombstone, when the user died in our system. So there is no such user anymore. That user cannot log in. Nobody else can occupy that username after that. But on the inside, the user information will be preserved forever. And if any other system referenced that user, this authentication schema would act as a so-called source of truth. If you lost any information about who this person is, you would actually go to the originator, to the source of truth, the authentication system, wherever it is, and ask, can you tell me the name of this user, the city he lives in? Because, for instance, we need to populate the tax sheet. That is legitimate request, and authentication system, authentication schema and application must never delete this user after it was created. Okay, so we have this kind of persistent references by keys. We could accept this, and do you know why I have this constructor there, string empty? I have a private parameterless constructor because I want Entity Framework to populate this model object. It is private because nobody else in the application should have access to it. Entity Framework will construct from private parameterless constructor and populate using private property setters. So everything will work fine when populating from database, and the public constructor will expect all the values when you try to create a new object. Owner key. Now we have the owner key. I need to define them. Okay, user has unique username. Okay, model builder, entity user, property key is required. All right. Should I copy and paste? When I copy and paste code, I make many bugs. Okay, object key is unique, and I will have a unique index. So I have done it. On the other hand, product entity will also have this property, which is called owner key, which is required. But there will be no index, of course, because products, one user can have many products. All right, so I have prepared that, and I can add migration. I must specify entire context. Now I have to specify the entire context so that the entire database schema can be constructed. But again, when working with what did I do? Ah, good. These are the two users I created. Now they have to have their keys. That is what the error has warned me about. It could not prepare the script. So let me create GUID. Okay. Even though any string would suffice, I will still use GUIDs simply because I know they are unique. And I will assign two GUIDs to these two guys. What's wrong? Because they expect strings. And why am I doing two new GUID then? I already had strings. That's alright. That will do it. There are questions. It's very simple for me, for performance reasons basically, to use auto increment ID as the key. And yes, fragmentation is one of the reasons, index fragmentation is one of the reasons why you should be wary when using GUIDs. It is very simple and very fast if you use auto increment ID as a primary key, and these stable permanent keys, they don't even have to be GUIDs. What I'm doing is to sometimes generate a GUID and append part of the username so that this permanent key resembles the username. If you're reading logs, you will recognize the user. If the user changes username later, that won't be of much help to you, of course, but the GUID part will make that still unique, and even if that username is reused later, there will be no conflict. So I'm not creating a GUID column in the table. I am making a varchar column because I want to be able to generate these keys in a semi-semantically meaningful way. Yes, Ramon, thank you. This is why build is failing. I need to set the key, and let me get back to the console. This should work now, I hope. Okay, it succeeded. As you can see, there will be no non-nullable owner key in the product. There will be non-nullable key in the user. These two guys will receive their permanent keys. There will be the new unique index on user key, and everything works fine. So I can update database, and that should work fine. Hopefully. Yes. So we have it. We have the reference between product and key. But I'm not satisfied yet, because this is high-level code, this is .NET code, and I don't like strings, really. I usually expose a class, and it must be specific to every domain model. I expose a class named userKey. It will just wrap around a string, an immutable string, the read-only property. But it will give the meaning to that string, so you cannot mistake the key for a username, for example. That will be all for the beginning. User would expose the reference property. I will not call it user key, I will call it user reference. User ref, because it will be used to reference the user from any other part of code. And it will be new user ref, no, this is not string, of this key. And you will have to pass user ref here when creating the new user, because I don't want you to mistake strings. So I am now initializing the key, and this one, okay, now the string doesn't work. Let me create a convenient static user ref property getter empty, and I will, instead of sending an empty string, I will send an empty user ref. I hope that you like this coding style based on strong types. Don't pass strings around, because you will make mistakes. So I will have to create a user ref and create a user ref, and nothing has changed. I also want to receive the user ref here, owner value, and I want to have user ref here, owner. Okay, so these properties will be used by Entity Framework and these properties will be used by me. Unfortunately, when you are using any ORM, you will mix persistence and semantical properties in one bundle, and that is a great problem. That is connected to that question whether you expose DB set or not. You should, in a large project, this will become unbearable, and you will try to expose only your models, only what makes sense in .NET code to your .NET code. And when it comes to persistence, you would actually map this to a persistent product, to a database, to a data model product, which would have everything else. It is a long story, which we will not touch anymore. Okay, so to get back to that question of GUIDs and tables, this is not the GUID because I don't want to tie myself to a limited format, such as GUID, because in the future I might want to use to authenticate special users like service, publication, something. And it will have an ID which I know, which I have generated. It's not a GUID. That's why I'm using varchar actually to store these data, even though I'm generating them as GUIDs. I'm generating them as GUIDs just to make sure that they are unique and nothing else. I must add to the definition of table, I must ignore .reference. These are not part of the database. And here. So this is where my logic is mixed in with persistence logic. I don't like that. Okay, JetBrains ReSharper is slowing me down. Yes, always. So we have it. Can we add objects to the database? Where is the products index? Here. I should have a new product here, and I should be able to add it to the database. And you will see how strange it will be now that we have a owner reference. We will need to find that owner reference, but look at here. If I log in as me and go to products, come on, go to products and try to add a product. I will have that one here, but where is my owner? The owner is in the HTTP context. Since I have logged in the user here, I will have the claim available. So it will be base user claims first with type which is equal to claim types dot what? I only have name. That is the username. That is informal. That is just used for the UI. You cannot reference users by username. I need what is called identifier. Name identifier. That is used to uniquely identify the logged in, the authenticated user. But I didn't set it here. So I will set it. New claim types. Name identifier, it will be the user key. That is why I needed key, so that I can now set it into the HTTP context. And the authentication module in pipeline will populate this when you are authenticated with cookies authentication, that cookie will be processed. And these claims will be reconstructed on the server for you. And when you get here, you will have that. There will be no reason to believe that there is no name identifier. And now that I have it, I will be able to create product as no ID yet, name from the form, and new username from owner key. So now I'm using the information from the logged in user to populate the new product, and then I get to the database context, which I don't have. Oh, I do have it. I have it. So I can go to this db context products add new product, and this db context save changes, and that should hopefully appear in the database. Will this work? Did I implement the new feature? While we wait for the application to compile, you can answer. You can give me your thoughts. Did I implement what that ticket told me? Go and implement adding new products. Did I finish that ticket? Let me put a breakpoint here. First or default, yes, but you see, the problem here, you think here. You're right. I don't need this at all. It will explode. You're perfectly right. This might explode if there is no name identifier, but if there is no name identifier, then it is a bug. This claim must exist, because I have already set that these pages require authentication, and if somebody was not authenticated when reading these data, that is a bug in my application. Somehow something didn't work on the server. I don't know what could lead to that. By the way, this will lead to that. Did I change it? Okay. Sequence contains no matching element. Did you see it? It exploded. Why? There was no name identifier, but I added it there. It failed, even though I have added this. Why? Do you know? It's a trick question. Okay, the last time when I logged in, I didn't have that piece of code here, and I didn't create the name identifier claim. So I have to log out and log in again, and for the first time, there will be that claim. And now, when I go to products and I create product named 1, I will have the owner key. You see, this is the ID of me. So I will add it, save changes, and when I get back, it will be here. This works. This seems to be working. If I go to details, I see it. If I want to delete this one, I will delete it. Everything works as expected, does it? Am I done? Let's see. If I log out and log in as my neighbor, go to products, I see somebody else's products. So, suppose that I pushed changes to source control and QA. If I forgot that I am QA as well, the QA would reject it, saying, oh, you didn't secure that. Other people can see your products. So I say, oh, that surprises me. Why? Oh, yes, I forgot to finish this one. Someone said at the beginning that there is no filter. Well, I couldn't filter back then because I didn't have the owner in the product model. But now I do have, and now I forgot. Basically, that is how you make bugs. You just forget. It's not that people don't know that every single page must require authentication, that every single page must filter, every access to a table must filter by whatever filtering criteria applies, so that every query can only return objects that are legal in the context in which it is used. Everybody knows that, and everybody forgets. I can say here where where product owner key equals what? Variable, I will have to copy and paste this code. Since I'm copying and pasting it, it is already a candidate to be moved to some reusable section, whatever. But I will once again consult the HTTP context, pull out the authenticated user's key, and filter by that user. That will obviously fix the issue. I can demonstrate that, and I will push my code again to source control only to be rejected by QA again. Why? If I go to products as my neighbor, there are no 1 and 2. Neighbor could create square, round, edgy product. He's thinking in completely different terms. Everything looks to work fine. When I log out and log in as me, I won't be able to see the products of my neighbor. But there are security holes here, and QA will surely find them, because if they don't find them, then hackers will. This is the details page for one product. And you see, it says that auto increment ID here. Now, I'm a hacker, and I think, is there a number 3? No. If I were looking from the outside, this is the development page, and it will show me the exception. If I accessed from the internet, I would see 500 internal server errors. So this attempt failed. Maybe 4. What about 4? Oh, there it is. So now I have just accessed the object created by my neighbor. And QA says you have a security bug again. So let's get back to the drawing table. What is that? That is the details page. Find by ID, the wretched find by ID. Never find by ID. It is a security hole. How do you know that you are allowed to see the ID? Even internally, this doesn't have to come from the URL. This could come from your internal code. Still, how do you know that you have right to touch this ID? Instead, get back to this one. I'm really getting tired of this copy and paste. Get the owner key and say .first, products first, product, owner key equals owner key, and product ID equals the one that was requested. Again, I'm calling first. It will explode if this ID doesn't exist, but I don't care, because if my application was right, it will find the product by ID belonging to this owner, and everything will work fine. If it doesn't find it, either because I mixed up the owners, or because I've had some stale ID which doesn't exist anymore for any reason, then what is that situation? That situation is a bug. And I want my bug to cause an exception. I want that exception to bubble up all the way to the UI layer, where the exception handler will handle it in a very specific way. To the user, it will redirect to a nice page which says, sorry, we are unable to process your request right now, try again later. You might be naive to say, you may contact support, but if you have a bug, then everybody will contact support, so keep it quiet. Just say, we cannot process your request right now, go play. and come back later. On the inside, however, that handler will log the entire call stack, all the information about the request, the context, the URLs, everything it has. It will log it with big red letters. It will raise the events. If you are using any monitoring software, anything, that event that you had an unhandled exception must appear right now somewhere where somebody is looking and will be alerted with an email and stuff like that, so that the developers can urgently get a ticket to look at this line and think, how did I get into the situation to have a product ID, an owner ID, owner key, which don't match? And that's it. So don't be too nice. Don't first or default and try to recover from when you receive null. There is no recovery. If I run the application, so I have pushed this change to QA again, hoping they will not bounce me again, but they will. They will, as they always do, because I'm not doing development right. While I'm doing this, can you tell me the solution which will save me from all these troubles forever? I don't want to fix bugs like this. They must never happen. That's the point. So, what was that? Number 4. Yes, it's not here. It doesn't exist. And the hacker will only see that page. We're unable to process your request. So they will know there's nothing here. I have solved that security issue which was reported, but look at here. There is this delete button. I could inspect that. Here's the form which says go delete number 2. Let me delete number 4. I have manipulated HTML with the cheapest of all tools. And when I press it, apparently nothing will happen. Nothing has happened that I can see. But when the neighbor comes, the first product, that square one, is missing. I have successfully deleted somebody else's object. And so I have another security bug. So, Bojan, there has to be some kind of restriction. Yes, there must be a permanent restriction. I must not be able to access objects freely. And that is, after an hour of talking, now we come to the topic of this talk. I'm doing that on the calling side. On displays, I'm calling that in every other. Delete, I didn't do it yet, so here, to delete, here. I must also filter by owner here. Then, look at this. Index, adding. Okay, this should be safe. This should be safe, okay. Then, looking at details. Details for 1. I had to filter myself. That is it. Back in the index here, I had to filter by owner. I did it on the calling end. Every single time. Why? That is bad coding practice. The problem with this, you can go to your programmers and say, you must filter every time. Every time you forget it, you have made a bug. Yes, you're right, perfectly right. But that is not correct. Because there will always be pages they don't know about. Okay, you can accept both properties. Yes, that is okay. I hope you all see Bojan's suggestion. You can accept both properties, the owner and yes, that is true. But I have a different idea because I like this idea of what is this index? I like this very much. That is the point. I don't want to complicate the caller. I want to have a caller who sees nothing, but still stays safe. For example, I was writing some ASP.NET code yesterday, and I had to post some form, and I received bad request status 400 back. And I was looking for an hour. I didn't see what I'm doing wrong, and for some reason I didn't read the error message. So that was my fault. In the end, it turned out that I forgot to add anti-forgery token to the form. It is one line of code. However, I forgot it. But the server has a layer in the pipeline, has a pipe, which is checking for it, for me. And you are perfectly free to forget to verify the form submission in the on-post action. You don't have to do that. It will be done for you. That is the kind of design I prefer. Things must happen without your intervention. They must be there, and your API must look the same with and without that check. Verification must be done automatically by design, and you must not lay your hand on an object which doesn't have that pipe which verifies the call. In security terms, security is not a commodity. You don't expect your customer to come in and say, I want you to fetch me 2 meters of security in blue color. It doesn't work like that. You have to make secure application all the way through since day one, and every single line of code must be secure in sense that it knows that it is safe to execute whatever it says. And it does that by using some services that are injected into it and knowing that those services have been secured by design, that it would not receive the service object if it weren't allowed to execute that action on it. In other words, this DB context, I must not have it. I must not have a reference to it if I weren't secure. Unfortunately, DB context, which derives from DB context base, doesn't support security out of the box. So what do? We introduce our own abstraction. I will implement it here. Instead of accessing the context, we will instead use a gateway. And now I have intentionally broken the application, and I can look for compile time errors. It will have to expose products. Now, again, back to the question, what will products return? IEnumerable, iQueryable, dbset. dbset is not secure, so no. I opt for iQueryable, how do I pronounce that? Of product. This will remove one compile time error. Then, products add. There's no way for me to add new object. I will have to support it somehow. And save changes. Save changes is easy. It says, that's it. That is already implemented here, defined there in the DB context, so this works. I will add a separate void add product, and I will have to implement it. Base set of product add object. That's it. I will remove these products, and that should work, I think. Yes. Technically, yes. In the startup, I will, where are my services? Here. I will add scoped service, I context gateway, content gateway to only be the content context and nothing more. So everything should work as before, only I want to remove. So now this is the request. Suppose that there was a security auditor who told you that you should not check the owner yourself. So you should not make these calls. In the index, in the details, where are you? First, product ID. So there is no find anymore. I will receive I content gateway consistently. Why do I have this? This is some later design. I don't need it. So there is no find anymore. There's no find. Okay, product. Yes, lambda. All right. There is no this anymore. I'm not required to know it. And in the delete, I didn't even fix it. But this must... Why? Oh, okay. I will need remove here. I content gateway. And it will not have the remove. I will have to support remove. DB context remove. All right. Add and remove. I have an interesting idea. While I'm here, why removing in this way? Why not remove by ID? What do you think about that? I can copy that entire... Okay, without save changes, of course. Where are you? Look, I will start from products. First or default, if this set of product remove and no save changes. I can implement the entire API for removing by ID so that the client becomes very simple. And I might be, because ID is not telling what it is, I might call it remove product. I need save changes. That's it. Very simple client. But now, all security holes are back. What say you? All security holes are back. Because I haven't filtered by owner key anywhere. However, while I had a number of pages to make that check before, now the situation is different. Now I have only one class to put all security checks there, all the filters. How do I do that? Very simple way, by accepting the owner. And owner will be mandatory, but I'm still not ready to add it here to the constructor. Why? Because there is a problem with it. Do I have? Yes, I do have constructor here. This is the index page showing details, and this is the get page. This is the constructor of the model, which is locating products. And this is the get request, which is actually reading products. Do I need this? I'm not using this variable. No. Again, this is the constructor, and this is the get action. These two execute in different moments. And that will be the problem. Let me start the application and you will see. Login is me again. And look for products. I'm in the constructor. Base user is null. Even though I am authenticated and there is the cookie, I am logged in. I'm not authenticated. That is what I want to say. I am not authenticated yet. Because at this stage in the execution pipeline, the objects are being created, DB context is non-null. It has already been created by dependency injection, by IOC container. It has constructed the DB context. If I had the owner parameter, I would have to make it accessible to the IOC container before this moment. And the only way to make it accessible is to read the HTTP context and read the user, but user is not populated yet because authentication pipe comes later. So DB context cannot be created yet. However, when GET action comes, the entire pipeline has already passed. And now we do have the user, and we do have, if you can see these small letters there, claims. Result view gives 2 claims, one of them being name identifier. So everything will work inside the action, but not at the moment the page is created, constructed. And that is the problem. We cannot just construct the DB context anymore. This content context is secured now. I might even call it, I don't know, secure content context, so that everyone reading code knows that this one is secure. But then you won't be able to construct it, because it will request user ref owner, which will be populated. How do we do that? We do that using the simplest of all tricks, the factory, which creates when user ref is known. When you said that we could pass both properties, the owner and supposedly ID or something, the actual parameter. This principle with factories is splitting that same idea into 2 separate steps. One step is to fix the owner, and then the second step is to do the action you wanted by passing the mandatory parameter. In that way, you will see that the client code will actually be simpler, because we will inject the factory into it. So we will not receive, for example, in the index, we will not receive the gateway. We will receive the gateway factory. Factory. So right. At the moment when this page is constructed, we will have a perfectly valid factory. All right. Everyone will have to repeat this. So I will jump to good old copy and paste. Nothing will actually work here. That's a problem. I will not be able to compile this code until I find that user in all cases. But once I succeed building the application, it will work fine. You will see. Okay, so what I need here is actually the object. Like iContent gateway. Gateway is this factory.create. Create by what? By pulling that name identity from the HTTP context. In this moment, on post action, that name identifier claim will be populated. That is certain. I must create it because I want to use it twice. I need to remove the product and to save changes. So I need this object twice. This is technically correct code, but I have a better idea than this. Could I somehow create the gateway itself? Could I create it? No, because at this moment I would have to call create, this DB context, create and pass what? I don't have the key. It's not populated yet. But listen, I could do something else. Lazy gateway. I could create a lazy object, lazy of I content gateway, which does all that. This or base, I like to make a distinction between this and base. User claims, all that I had already. First claim type is claim types name identifier dot value turned into a new user reference. No. Yes. Okay, so I can create a factory which will capture the claim, the name identity claim, at the moment when lazy dbcontext.value is touched, called the first time. So I will not create this. I will say this dbContext and this dbContext. My client code will behave exactly the same as it ever behaved. Just use the dbContext. But with this design, the context will not be that plain old context deriving from dbContext base. It will be a secure dbContext with captured owner, held inside of it, captured the first time this page was actually used. So you won't see any difference compared to construction in the setting it in the constructor. On the other hand, if you have to type all this code in every class, that's cumbersome. Let's make an extension method. Like, it doesn't need to be public. Class secure gateway extensions. It will extend what? It will extend the page model because it has the user property. Okay, now I know what I want. Public lazy of I content gateway. Lazy content gateway to lazy content gateway. This, okay, I will extend the factory and receive page model page. That will work. So I can copy and paste this, or cut and paste this code, fix it a bit, and that should work. Factory and page, and that should be alright. Why not? Oh, because it's not static. Alright, so I will just say dbContext factory to lazy of this. Done. In this way, I will have access to dbContext when I need it with only this much complication, this much complexity added to every single consumer. But every single consumer will be secure from now on. So let's secure them. Okay, it will be, I will repeat that whole thing. I will repeat that. Lazy. And receive the factory. I already have it. I will implement the content. And you see, nothing changed. Implementation is the same. It simply uses the dbContext. The last page where I will do this will also have this same header, okay, and will construct the lazy context here, and everything will be fine. Nothing has changed in the way I'm using the context. Of course, I will have to fix the services, because there will be no secure context anymore. Instead, I will have to produce a factory. I need a factory. But I don't have a concrete factory. Okay, let's get back. Let's get back to the drawing table. Public class secure content context factory. So it will just create it, but it will need options. So these options will become, I hope this is not too boring to you. I simply have to code all this. Private options. And I will have to receive these options through the constructor of the factory. That is why we need concrete factories, because they will probably capture some parameters of their own. This options and owner. So the options will be there when the application starts. They will be known, they come from configuration, but user owner does not come. So that is why we need a concrete factory. So let's construct it. And after this, my code will work. Of course, it will work the same as it used before, which means with the whole bunch of security holes. But we will have a chance to fix them. So, it is new factory, but now I need DB context options builder for secure content context. Use what? New, probably new. Where am I? Dot use SQL Server. It needs connection string. I have hard-coded connection string and options. Okay. Now I am doing, you remember that call, where is it? Add DB content, the context. Add DB context is actually doing this. Where am I? Creating options builder and constructing options for you so that you can populate them. I have populated them with just a connection string, and that is all it does. There's no much magic around it. However, at this moment I do have the factory, and I hope, if I haven't forgotten something big, I should have my DB context available here. Available to be constructed, remember that. We are close to the end. Even though all security holes are still here, we are very close to the end, because it will be no-brainer to remove all security holes from this application. Okay, products. Why didn't it... Yes, you remember? I haven't filtered by the owner. Everything is here. I was waiting on the onPost. I didn't want to do that. I wanted on get. 4. DB context has already been constructed. It was constructed here. That's not what I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you the moment when it is constructed. But nevertheless, this works, obviously. I have that. There is number 4. I can delete it. I can see the details. Everything works. With no security added, but it works. So, this is one big leap in application design, to step from DB contexts to DB context factories, which are populated with the owner. And you apply that programming technique in cases when objects served by that DB context are owned, and you need to secure access. And what you do now, this should go there, the infrastructure. What you do now is simply secure access at the source of it. This is the secure, it promises security. This is secure DB context. when I ask for products, this is iQueryable. I will say dot where product owner key equals this owner value. I will add the filter for you so that you can forget, so that you don't have to think about it. What about other operations? Adding an object. If object owner key or owner ref, but I didn't implement equality. Okay, this is the value object. This should have equals operator implemented in equal. Forget about it. Equals this owner value. Only if it matches, add it to the database. Don't let anybody add new objects in the name of somebody else. Remove. First, our default. What are the conditions? Product owner key equals this owner value, and done. In maybe 2 minutes, I have secured the entire application. Nobody will ever make a security bug because there is no place to put it. And what is more, I have enabled logging of everything Entity Framework does, so you will be able to see the log. Okay, I'm logged in as me. Do you remember what will happen when I press products? Get will execute. That line looks exactly the same as it looked like when I started writing this application. It had no filter because there was nothing to filter on. I am not filtering by the owner. However, I will clear the output, debug, press products. I only see my products, 1 and 2, no neighbors' products. But if you look at the output, oh, I didn't enable logging. Can I do that in startup? Use, here it is. Why I didn't find it? Services, do I have services? I do. Get service, iLogger factory. I knew it's there. Okay, so I will use Logger factory and I will build options after that. Let's start again. This was close. Come on. Products. There they are. And there is the query. So, I want to open the index. This is code and this is the query. If you see small print, you will see that it selects from content.products but adds where owner key equals the parameter. That where clause has been added by the DB context. I didn't write it. When I try to see the details, it will be different. No, why I didn't go to the end? Okay, this is the where clause. When I look for the details are asking for the first one with product ID, but SQL code looks select top one, that is the first, from content products, where owner key equals the key, and ID equals the ID I gave. So I only gave the product ID, and owner key was added by infrastructure. And when I try to delete it, it will be even funnier. This one has disappeared. It starts from, where is select? It is selecting, once again, it is selecting the first object. Again, with the owner and ID, both are queried, even though I have only chosen, where is delete here? Delete. I'm again only removing by ID. I'm not worried about the owner, but the owner will be queried in the where clause. Owner key and it added it twice. not optimal, okay. And after that, the DB context is deleting by ID, but only after getting the ID which matches the owner key. All right? To finish this presentation, this is how I made access to one particular table which is sensitive to security. I have fixed all security holes in current requirements by exposing a secure DB context which is holding the reference to the owner of all objects and adding filters where needed so that no client-side code has to think about it. This is why it's asking twice. Set of product. It was my bug. Okay, so I have moved all security concerns into one single class and solved them there so that calling code doesn't have to do that. For the end, I will tell you one anecdote which really happened. When someone had a problem to print an invoice from a website, she asked me to help her with the page which was obviously broken. And what I did was to inspect history and to find some page which shows the invoice. I did that. I found the page in the history, copied, selected the invoice, moved it to MS Word and printed from there. It was very simple. But what caught my eye immediately was that the invoice had an auto-increment ID in the URL, which always raises suspicion. Similar to what I did here. My products are identified by database ID. So, I saw that, but did nothing special. But while I was doing that, while I was dealing with the printer and document, see, this is the auto-increment ID, when I got back to the application, it turned out that the session has expired. And then it clicked that I was pulling the invoice from their system without having a session. Okay, I don't mind. But then I thought, if this was invoice 155, was there maybe an invoice 154? And there was. So I took that e-commerce website and just for fun saw about half a dozen previous invoices that showed precise names, addresses, and goods purchased by totally different people. Why did that happen? Obviously because somebody forgot to secure that access to that page. Plus, obviously because I could guess the IDs. If IDs were something made up, I would have a much harder time to make them up, to try to guess them. And, of course, the problem was that the access was granted to an unauthenticated user, to an anonymous user. If they had a secure layer in every layer of the application, nothing special would happen if they forgot security in one layer. That is why I said security is not a commodity. You don't come at random moment in development and say, I will add security. No, you don't. You build security in every single layer all the time. And if you forget something, and you will forget, then hackers will only have access to a limited area of your application. But as that piece of application goes deeper under, like calling the database, it will stop. There will be no way for a hacker to go all the way through to the database and back to the UI. And the topic of this presentation was securing the database, so here it is. If you like to extend this, you may object that this class is doing two things. It is adding security and exposing everything proposed by this interface. So you can have two implementations. The DB context, bare DB context, which is inside of it, and the secure wrapper, which implements this and only adds where in a couple of places and doesn't actually do anything with DB set or whatever. So you can extend this design, move it forward. You can think that in more complicated scenarios, this won't work because it's not only the owner who has access. I gave you that example with a service. A service might have access to all products without owning them. Then you would have to add another table in this schema, which is, for example, listing rights of other users. So you would not say where owner equals this, but owner plus the list of those who have the right to read. This value belongs to that list. So this where clause would become more complicated, but you would always follow the requests, the requirements, and implement them as they state. If you have security concerns, you implement them explicitly, but only in one place. That is, if there is one thing you should remember from this talk, then that is it. Implement security of every object in just one place. Don't let the caller remember to behave securely. That was all I had to show you for today. Thank you all for attending, and I hope to see you soon again.